Hello everybody, my name is Louis and welcome back to Flickering Myth. Today we're talking about Valhalla, great games that aren't that great. The cyberpunk label has gone through many iterations since Cyberpunk 2020 hit tabletops back in the day. We've seen everything from dystopian thrillers like Deus Ex and Shadowrun to survival horror titles like the System Shock series. VA-11 HALLA, more commonly referred to as Valhalla, was another unique spin on the genre. Developed by Sukoban Games, it combined the visual novel format pioneered by Japanese studios with something resembling a bartender simulation. Released to critical acclaim from both fans and critics, its success was so strong it set the stage for a sequel next year. However, for all the praise the game has received, we unfortunately found it to be lacking in several key departments. It had a lot of good qualities to it for sure, but key problems with the story, characters and even limited gameplay prevent it, in our opinion, from being a great game. Be warned, spoilers will be discussed. So, starting off, it's cyberpunk, but in name only. Valhalla puts players in control of a bartender named Jill, who lives in a supposedly crime-ridden fascist metropolis called Glitch City. Newspapers accessible from Jill's iPad help to establish this framework from the get-go, by detailing stories of black hats, terrorist groups, corrupt politicians and corporatocracy tales that are further built upon by some of the customers you meet. It's all well and good until you realise one thing: the game isn't interested in any of that. The old motivation behind cyberpunk has always been what would happen if technology continued to advance while society's problems remained the same, and it seems like Sukoban took that too literally. See, most of Valhalla is spent talking about past paramours and relationships. No matter who you're speaking to, whether it's your bionic arm boss or a law enforcement official, the conversations almost always turn to something about romances or bus sizes, and it just begs the question of why. Why waste all this time creating a seedy, grotty world only to make the actual interactive dialogue about something as boring, plain and banal as love? Look, we get it. The idea was to show how an average, working class citizen would live day to day in a dystopia where things are becoming more suffocating. Someone who has to worry about rent isn't going to care much about what some hack politician has to say. It's a fascinating concept, but it lacks good execution. Yes, people aren't likely to pay much attention to the political scene around them in our contemporary era, but in a world like Glitch City, where crimes like muggings and murder and rape are described as daily occurrences, where hacker groups are leaking massive government information every day, where automatons are literally competing with the existing workforce, how can anyone realistically opt to chat about inconsequential things like past girlfriends, or whether or not someone has implants? But the thing is, even with more shallow, uninteresting topics, Valhalla doesn't explore them to the best of their potential. So, where's the morality? Two of the biggest story elements in Valhalla revolve around two characters, a humanoid artificial intelligence named Dorothy and Jill's ex-girlfriend Lenore. Dorothy is a sex worker who, despite being a legal adult, takes on the appearance of an underage girl to please her clientele. Lenore, on the other hand, is deceased by the events of the game, having died from a fatal disease of the era called nanomachine rejection, a condition that occurs where the body rejects the nanomachines injected into it, which most of humanity has undergone against their will. The thing is, the writers insisted on primarily focusing on these two aspects, yet don't even bother going into the moral dilemmas both carry. To start with, take Dorothy. The idea of using something resembling a child to satiate paedophiles is incredibly interesting as far as ethics are concerned, yet that factor isn't addressed in any exchange between Jill and Dorothy whatsoever. It's treated as normal, which, yes, may be the case for Glitch City, but the whole point of science fiction is to explore complex ideas, and for a game focused on narration and dialogue, there's shockingly little of that. Compare this to the original Deus Ex, which similarly gave you the option to talk to a bartender about socio-political topics that discussed government and power. Those convos were sharp, intriguing, and very well written. Valhalla's writing is solid, but only from a surface standpoint. The death of Lenore is even worse, because it doesn't even bother to examine an immoral medical issue in Valhalla's own setting, forced transhumanism. Inhabitants are, without their consent, injected with nanomachines, and no one bothers to challenge this or question this? Forget the fact that this causes actual pain and death in noted cases. Like with Lenore, how did this decision even come to be passed legally? Why was there no uproar? Why does no one talk about this? Why doesn't Jill of all people care now? Wasted potential doesn't even begin to describe Valhalla as a whole. So, red pill or blue pill? Story is one thing, gameplay is another. Even with a limited computer game like Valhalla, there are systems in place that have to benefit the player, otherwise there's no point in investing in the game. Now, we've seen a lot of unfair comparisons between Valhalla and Lucas Pope's Papers, Please, which is unjust because both are going for different things. And Valhalla is definitely a child of the visual novel and simulation subset of video games. The problem isn't that it isn't like Papers, Please, the problem is that it's not even a good visual novel. See, visual novels and VNs are based around discourse and choice, and while Valhalla has plenty of the former, it very much lacks in the latter. Sure, you do technically have the ability to up the alcohol content in patrons' drinks, making them susceptible to inebriation and consequently more open to telling you things, but this has no impact on the game's potential endings whatsoever, of which there are 5. No, all 5 endings are literally based around 2 instances, where you have to serve a certain drink. None of the other conversations matter because these 2 events will always occur in the story, no matter what you do. The lack of choice even extends to simple things like being able to change up the decor of your environments. Sure, you're able to buy new items and wallpaper for your apartment, but the aesthetic window is so small that you can't make out any of the significant differences. The actual bar, on the other hand, you can see. But, as ironically the case, you have no options whatsoever to spice it up outside of picking the background music. Not like you'll want to spend money considering Jill's mandatory personal expenses like rent come up as barriers. Barriers that discourage the already limited choice you have. Not quite good game design. And to top it all off, the lack of voice acting is a true bummer, meaning emotional or hysteric character moments don't have the punch a talented voice artist will be able to bring to the curve. Finally, conclusion. Overall, Valhalla was a refreshing change of pace from conventional dystopian video games. From the beginning, the developers literally tell you in a title card that it's best played getting comfortable, and that you should sit back and relax, and that's completely true. There's no cooking mama type time limit and you can mess up the drinks as much as you want. And what visuals you can see are absolutely beautiful, and the techno soundtrack is a blast to listen to. Before a game heavily reliant on narrative storytelling, it just doesn't tell a story that lives up to the visceral world surrounding and inhabiting your little bar. The whole time I was playing Valhalla, I just couldn't help but wonder if there was something more interesting going on in this city that I was being denied the pleasure of being a part of. This has been Louis for Flickering Myth. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.